Okay, so thanks for joining this morning. We're going to run through P6-Calculator, and we will focus on the costing aspects of P6-Calculator. So P6-Calculator is a tool that Emerald has built, and we've been using it with clients for over 10 years. I can't believe it, but yeah, over 10 years. And it's an add-on tool we built to work within P6. So as a user, you don't necessarily know it's there. It's built right into the P6 environment. So I'm Nicole Jardin. I'm joining you today from Calgary. I'm the founder and CEO. And on the line as well is Dan McMillan. He's our most senior programmer, and he's big brains behind the calculator. So if you have questions, we can definitely tackle them between the two of us. Let's talk about why we built the tool. So what were some of the common struggles? Well, we have many clients who want to do some sort of costing in P6, but some of them felt that it didn't work, it didn't have the flexibility they needed, or were worried about the level of effort to maintain the system. So we built P6-Calculator to help deal with some of those struggles that they were having. Now, what we find with our clients, and I think it was probably about 6 or 7 years ago, Oracle did a poll. I'm not sure exactly how they proceeded with the poll, but what they found was, of course, people using P6, everyone uses it for scheduling. About 70 to 80% in that range use it for resources as well. And then only about 30 to 40% were also doing costing. So the idea is, with some of these add-ons, enhancements that we've made, these additional utilities, you can bump that up and do more costing within the system. Now, the benefit of that is you're getting one place of truth, or a more standardized approach, more consistent approach to dealing with your costing. And with Calculator, your administration is much easier because we're doing a lot of the heavy lifting that you might do manually or in other tools and imports and all this other creative stuff that people come up with to try and do some of the things they want. So what we're trying to do is make the development of a specific standard much easier, okay, and make that quicker so that we've got a nice consistent approach. If you're a contractor, you need that consistency across your projects. If you can't have a common resource library, how do you make comparisons between your labor on perhaps your carpentry labor on one job, your carpentry labor on another? How are you going to do a comparison? How are you going to be able to see where there's gaps and problems before it's too late, right? And how can you help improve your estimating? You need that consistency. So when a lot of our clients who want to do some sort of costing and profiling and earn value, true earn value management, look at data from other systems. Okay, so you might have an integrated environment, and many of our clients do. You know, it's one of the things that we've done for our 29 years. So we're coming into our 29th year of operation, and we've had programmers on the team from the beginning. So we do a lot of integrations, and that makes P6 a much more powerful tool because the data entry to handle all the costing, all the cost accounts, new resources, things of that nature, is much lighter. So that's why we built this tool. And the whole objective here is to try and, again, get the data that we need to make good decisions. That's the whole reason we use P6, right? We're putting schedules together so we get people at the right place at the right time. Communication is critical, and having good data, complete data, to help you make those decisions where people need to be for an efficient project delivery. That's what we're trying to do. So we need to be able to communicate that out. We need to be able to see the data in a clean, consistent manner, repeatable manner, comprehensive manner, and we need to be able to use that to make decisions. So one of the things that complicates this is the updating. Okay, so it's one thing to try and get all that data together for planning, and that can be a challenge in and of itself. But updating is where the rubber really meets the road, and it's not easy to manage so many contractors, so many vendors, so much manufacturing, so much engineering. So the updating becomes a challenge. So again, having more streamlined methods to help you is what I'm going to try and show you, okay, in this webinar. And I already mentioned getting the extended team what they need so they can make decisions, and gathering the data from the extended team in an efficient manner. Hugely important. So as I mentioned, P6-Calculator is embedded inside of P6. So it's a tool that we've built. We use the API, the web services component of P6, with a bunch of our utilities that we've built over the years to do additional features, functions, calculations, flagging, auto-filling of values, etc., inside of P6. Okay, so when you look at getting a tool like this, you need to get some consulting, because we help you build the different pieces that you're looking for. But the benefit is you save huge amounts of data entry, huge amounts of data manipulation, importing, exporting, etc., that you might entertain to do the data that you're looking for. Okay, so that's really the benefit. And often they're integrated environments. Often they're going to be integrated environments. So we're going to be pulling data partly from maybe an accounting system. It could be a system that you might have for drilling, for example. So specialty software that you have, or an engineering environment where you're doing design documents. So we've integrated to all sorts of different things. You might have work orders in an SAP or a Maximo or a JDE, and you integrate off of those as well. Okay, so often people who are looking at doing costing, they're integrating with other systems. It could be a unifier. It could be a contract manager type tool. It could be timesheet systems. Okay, so it can be many, many things, and we've integrated to, I'm sure, well over 50, maybe in the range of 80 or 100 different types of systems. Okay, so that's where the benefit starts to come in, because you can populate those data elements with calculations that you want into P6, and often we're integrating at the resource and expense level, and then we're rolling up or rolling down. So you're going to see, I'm going to show you a bit of rolling up and a bit of rolling down as well inside of here. Okay, now the automations then take place, and they're either automatic or they are managed by the user, and you're going to see a bit of both in today's session. Okay, so let me jump in a second here. I just want to do one thing, and then we're going to jump in, and I'm going to start to show you the system live. I just want to do one thing that I forgot to clear from yesterday's webinar. Okay, I'm going to have to find it later. Okay, not an issue. Let's get right into it. So let me start sharing my screen, and I will show you P6. Alrighty. Okay, so you should be seeing P6, and I'm going to use P6 client today, but everything I'm showing you works up in the web, or P6 EPPM, or the P6 web as well. Okay, so I'm going to use 3 projects here today and try and run through a variety of different things that we've done with clients over the years. And we've got more, but we will give you some food for thought here on how you can proceed if you're looking at some costing. So first and foremost, for costing. So usually there's a team who's building an estimate of information. And that information is going to create activities, create resources, create expenses, okay? And you don't have to use all of those facets, but those are the costing facets, the resources and expenses. So one of the challenges that we have, particularly if you're a contractor, but also if you're an owner, you may well have the same challenge. The first one is in P6, we have a resource dictionary. Now, as much as possible, what you're trying to do is have a common set of resources across your projects so that you can do comparisons. If you can't compare the projects and see where problems are arising, see who's hitting the costing, who's not, you're missing a huge piece of information for your analysis, okay? Particularly if you're doing more than one project. You know, if you're on one mega project and you don't have other comparisons, that's a little different situation. But oftentimes you've got a portfolio of projects and you need that comparison point. So one of the weaknesses we have in P6 is that we only have 5 different rates. If you're a contractor working in different parts, let's say of Canada, you know, different provinces, your rates will be very different per province. And then if you're working around the world, good luck trying to manage anything with only 5 rate options. So the first thing I'm going to show you is we can expand the rate capability in P6. Now in this example I'm showing you is I have some different rates and it's per project. So these are project numbers 23022, 23011, and I'm about to start a new project and it's 23033. Okay, so I need new rates from the estimating team for this project. Now, not only am I going to have a rate that we've tagged as the sell rate, so what we're providing to the client, that's the rate we used. Well, that rate would include some things like perhaps overhead and profit, perhaps a margin and a tax rate. It could be a variety of different things that you peel off to come up with your cost. So what your cost rate is plus additional elements become your sell rate. So those can vary. Now those can vary per resource, of course, and per project. So what we've done is expand that and make that more flexible. Now, what does that mean? Well, I don't want to type all those in. I sure as heck don't want to type in hundreds of different rates, hundreds of different margins, hundreds of different tax rates. I don't want to have to type that in. So that's the sort of data you can get from your estimating folks into Excel and bring that in through another one of our most tools, the P6 Loader. Okay, so this is a sheet that P6 Loader has pulled out of P6. So P6 Loader allows you to upload and export or download data from P6. So this is the sheet and I've got it ready to upload data into the global area, which in this case is the resources. So this is one of the strengths of P6 Loader is it can hit virtually all the data in P6. And in this case, we're going to update the resource dictionary with the rates that the estimating group gave us for this project. Now, the estimating group will also give us some other info. So they'll give us the WBS structure, usually, okay? Usually, and good idea to make that as consistent as possible across your projects. They will give us the list of activities that they've estimated against. And we don't need a lot, we need a duration. And they would normally have that, some sort of idea of the duration. They will give us the resources and expenses, okay? So this is where all the money is going to sit. So again, you need a strategy on how that data is going to look. So in our case, we're going to have resources, we're going to have cost accounts, and we're going to use roles, okay? Now, if these resources are already attached to a primary role, they may not need to give that to you, but depending on how you do your estimating, we would want both. And then we don't need a lot of data from them. We need the units per time they're expecting us to use up. We need the quantities, okay? So that's going to be something that they're going to provide us, okay? So typically these would all be filled in. And then they're either going to give us what the cost was that they've allowed for, or we're going to use the rates that they provided to calculate it. And I'm going to show you both aspects. And then we may have some items that are not necessarily going to be a resource, okay? And you would, again, have a standard on how you would do that within your organization. So things that are perhaps administrative, things that are costs that don't have to be graphed against a maximum limit. So things like perhaps travel costs would be a good example. Other sort of inspections that don't necessarily have to be against a limit. Perhaps site trailers, or perhaps internet costs. There's all sorts of costs that don't necessarily have to be a resource, okay? So those could fall into an expense. And again, we would normally like to be using cost accounts to marry this up, okay? Okay, so once we've coordinated with estimating how we're going to share data, okay, and get a standard in place, that data can be output into a format such as this. So this is our loader format, so that we can import it, okay? You can't import directly every single aspect easily into P6, and you sure can't get it out in a nice, simple to use one spreadsheet does all of it. And P6 Loader also lets you cross multiple projects into one spreadsheet, okay? So that's makes it huge in terms of managing your data, much, much easier. So I'm going to show this and I'm going to load it in. And then we'll get a project started from more or less from scratch. Okay, so I'm going to use this upload button. I'm going to navigate to this file. I'll go ahead and upload that, and should load. And then we'll have that data sitting in P6. Okay, so it worked. And I will go to P6 and I need to refresh this. So the first thing we should see is we should see these rates start to come in, so we can start to have costing take place. And we should see some activities in here now, because we had no activities in there a minute ago. Okay, so we have some base information that has come in from that. And let me go ahead and flip to a different layout so that I can show you this a little bit better. And yeah, we'll go to this one. Okay, so very simple example. Okay, this is not meant to represent exactly a real project in the data I put in. I'm just trying to explain the way this can work. And then it can work on large projects. So we've got clients that have used these utilities on large projects. So we've got our resources in, okay, and we've got our quantities, we've got the rates, we've got P6 calculating a variety of things, and we'll run through that in a minute. And we've got expenses, both on the engineering task as well as the earthworks task, okay? Now, something that is another challenge that several of our clients have faced is they work in more than one currency. So the example I'm going to show you is we're a Canadian company, but we're working on a US dollar project. So that is also a challenge. And I'm going to use the first example I'm going to include is the example where we have just one currency. So Canadian company, but we're running the project in US dollars. So I need to fit two types of reporting into that world. I need to report to the client where we're at, and that's in USD. And I need to report internally to corporate how we're doing in Canadian. So this can be a challenge. And what you're going to see here is I've got an exchange rate that I want to manage here at the project level. And you can see in this example, I can have different exchange rates per project. So that's something that's not easy to do at all in P6. In fact, you really can't do it. You get one exchange rate for the whole system, which of course will never work, because especially as we've seen in the last few months, the exchange rates, the currencies are going crazy all over the place. So you need a better way than one for the whole database. So I'm going to go ahead and run P6-Calculator on this project that I just brought in. So I'm manually telling it to go ahead and work its magic and calculate these different currencies. So in this example, my project currency, so what I'm reporting with the client is in US dollars, and my currency internal that I'm tracking against is Canadian. Now I just loaded up the activities, so I will ask it to run. And what I do is I save it after I made the edit and I refresh it, okay? And what I'm gonna see happen in a second or a minute, just depending on how quick it is, it's gonna start to put in some values. So it's gonna calculate my total sell, so what I've agreed with the client. It's gonna strip away the overhead and the profit, and it's gonna show me my cost. Okay, so I've got one example here that's already been run through, and this one's just going to take a second here. Okay, now this is at the project level. We're going to see it, but it's coming because of all the legwork it's going to do down at the resource and expense level. So it's going to do all those calculations. It's going to find the sell. It's going to find the cost. It's going to give me both my ledger or my corporate reporting as well as my project reporting. So again, we'll just wait for this to run through. So we've got a lot of utilities in our database. So just take a second. Looks like it's coming now. Perfect. Okay, so it switches from go to pass. So I know it was successful. It was able to do the calculations. And then what we see is we see all this data filled in. So based on a few things, and let me explain the layers that we've got in here. So we have an exchange rate managed at the upper level, being the project level. And you can see I have an overhead and profit here, or a margin and tax. Okay, so it could be a variety of different things. This is sort of a master value. But you might have noticed I loaded in a more detailed value. So I actually have the potential to also override at this level with a value. So that gives us a lot of nice flexibility in terms of our estimate and how we want to manage the particular costing. Now, if you need to, you could even have an override down on the actual resource as well. Okay, so you can have an override on the particular rate on a particular activity. So if you need that flexibility, perhaps you get a change order and you want to have a higher rate. For sure, that can happen. The client really needs it and you want to make a little bit of profit, a little bit more money on this change order because perhaps you know you're behind on other things. The idea is you want that flexibility. So we've got that. And I'll show you some overrides in a minute. So all this calculation now took place. So we've got not only the sell, so what we've agreed with the client, but we've also got our cost. And we've got the ability to start to manage our expectations on other layers. So it could be margin, it could be tax rates, it could be overheads and profits. It can be whatever you want, whatever makes sense. Okay, so these are just examples. Now, in doing that and using cost codes, it brings another layer of potential in terms of how you manage the data. Okay, so I mentioned we can have overrides. So I can go ahead and put in different values for particular resources, for particular activities, okay? And I can also manage the rates from the actual resource dictionary. So if I go to the dictionary, I can manage it from here. So it was a backhoe. Let me just find it. And it might be on the screen and I just can't see it. Yeah, it is, of course. And I can manage it from here as well. Okay, so I can put in different values and get it to recalculate. Okay, so I made those changes. I save them up and I can rerun this calculation and off it's going to go and redo the calculation. Now, in this example, we're telling it when we're ready to calculate, which I think makes sense. You don't want it to try and calculate while you're still making edits. So manually controlling it works well. And you just set it to go and you refresh it and it'll start to make the edits. So I'll just jump back to the activity and we'll look at it, make some changes here. And it looks like it's done actually. Yeah, there you go. We've got the little pass. So it took my new rate that I put in the dictionary. So that's an input. And this is an override that we've got. So we've overridden what was in the dictionary for this special use case, whatever that might be. Okay. So it recalculated it and then it rolls up these values from the merging the resources and expenses, and it merges them up into these fields. And then those fields are appropriately put into the P6 fields as appropriate. Okay, so you can see here, as appropriate, we're taking the values and we're putting them in. So that gives us the flexibility of dealing with our internal costing and understanding that while we can still see what we're selling the project for. So what is the budget with the client for the project. So we've got both. And we didn't have to do a lot of heavy lifting. That was pretty simple. I can just change some rates in the resources. I can change some project information, and it does the heavy lifting. Okay, so that's an example of one foreign exchange and with resources and overheads profits. Okay, so with a few different factors, we're doing all that calculating very, very quickly. You might have a situation where you have more than one exchange rate. Okay, so you might be running a project in Canada, but you're buying stuff from all over the world and you need to have multiple exchange rates that you're managing. So let me flip to a different layout and we'll look at managing multiple exchange rates. So when you have multiple exchange rates in a given project, you need a bit more flagging, if you will, at the project level to help you put in what are the exchange rates that you've agreed with this client for this project, okay? Or what exchange rates have you estimated this project with, okay? So it could be not necessarily that you have to have an agreement with the client for those rates, but it's something that you put into your estimate. Now, when we built this functionality into the system, we had designed it for just 2 rates. So the client said, oh no, we only buy USD, we only buy in euros. Well, lo and behold, while we were doing the project, they realized they needed Great Britain pounds and a few other currencies you can see there. So we were able to add those very, very easily with no rearranging of P6-Calculator. Okay. Now, how do we do that? Well, we came up with a nice standard naming convention. So I'm a huge proponent for tagging, bagging, and naming conventions galore. Because when somebody asks you to do something, it's going to be easy. If you don't have those standards in place, P6 becomes kind of a challenge all the way through when you get these new requests. So you can see we've got a very simple exchange rate. So if I wanted to add a new one on the fly right now, I can add one, okay? So we added I'm going to use this example of Japanese yuan. Or I'm probably saying that wrong. Yeah, Japanese yen, I think it is. Or I'm getting them wrong. Okay, so let's look at an example when we have multi-currency. And not only did this client have multi-currency requirements, they also had all sorts of additional calculations that they wanted us to help them with. Okay, so let me just go through some of these additional calculations that they wanted. So I'm going to look at 2 key activities. I'm going to look at an activity that is resource-based, people-based, so labor-based. I'm also going to look at an activity that is expense-based. So they're buying items, they're buying materials, okay? Now, if you're a manufacturer, you buy a lot of different materials from potentially all around the world. So that's the example I'm going to show here, okay? I'm going to start with a more simple example to try and make it easier for you to see. And I'm going to start with this example here. So they're going out, they're buying items, and they're buying items that are just in euros in this example. So they're buying maybe from one manufacturer, perhaps many. In this case, we're not showing every manufacturer, we're merging by the kind of things they're buying. So in this example, it's small material purchases. So purchases that are less than 50,000, but they've got multiple purchases in their estimate, as you can see here, because we're up to the 200,000 mark. Now, because they're buying those items and they know they're going to be shipped and brought into Canada in this example, they wanted automatic creation of other cost elements that always went along with it, okay? So I'm going to run the calculator and you're going to see those items come in here. So let me go ahead and run the calculator. Okay, so again, I'm going to invoke it when I'm ready. So I'm going to tell it to run, and I'm going to save that edit that I made, and then I will refresh it while I'm in this window. So I'm going out and I'm buying items, and those items are going to expand into multiple lines like I just deleted. So I kind of took the magic out of this, but you'll see them come back. So what are some of the items that you know go along with purchasing items? Well, it could be a variety of things in your country, but in this example, we had brokerage fees, we had freight fees, we had handling fees, plus dealing with the multi-currency, we have an exchange rate, okay? So that way we can manage this very, very effectively. So we have our expected cost, and some of these are in our base currency, being Canadian. So these are the brokerage, freight, and handling fees that we're going to pay, or an estimate of them. And we've got our purchase plus the exchange rate automatically from that purchase calculated. Now, all of these things are calculating off of basically a dictionary that we've established up here at the project level. So I showed you the dictionary of the exchange rates, but we can also have a dictionary. I'm going to just add one more thing here to show this quickly. We also have a dictionary of exchange rates, and here are some of them. Okay, so I'll just throw those on the screen. Okay, so we added a dictionary of exchange, not exchange rates, but a percentage of the cost that they estimate these different types of things can cost. Okay, so brokerage, handling, and freight. And they vary in this example by the kind of things. So small items get a certain percentage, larger items could get a larger percentage. So that's why you see this fluctuation. So this is all that the client had to manage. So what are we talking about? Maybe 15 fields or less. And from that, all the cost calculations were being automated, okay? Saving them huge amounts of time in building out the game plan. And then I'm going to start showing you some updating as well. Okay. Now, this is a one currency example on the purchases, but the example I had here could have multiple currencies being purchased in an activity. Okay, so depending on how you do your activity building, you might have one-to-one, but you might have multiple different currencies in one. Okay, so we can handle both. So this gives you an idea. This is a bit more complicated, but it gives you an idea of how you can automate a variety of different things that you're trying to handle on your project. Okay, now, so those are some examples of the building in the planning stage. What we also, of course, have to be able to handle, and I mentioned is the more complicated part, is when you're doing updating. So when you actually get into updating, what starts to happen is something that you estimated was, 3 different roles, and I estimated some amount of labor. The computer calculated the labor cost, and that may or may not be the budget, just depending on your particular circumstances. Okay, so from that, you end up, when you start executing on the work, you start to look like something like this. Okay, so we had those 3 roles where we had our estimate, but now that becomes all these other people actually working on the work. So you get a new role, so brand new role is starting to help on the work, and a bunch of individual people, in this case, are starting to charge time to the work. Okay, and that's pretty common. Now, this is an office type component. It's project management, could be engineering, could be procurement. And when you start to execute at the job site, so at the construction side, you could have additional equipment, you could have subcontractors, you could have different materials being used than expected. So it could really start to diverge from your estimate. So what you need to be able to do if you're trying to do any kind of cost control in P6 is you have to be able to handle all those scenarios. So let me flip to, I think I can stay in this layout. Let me try and stay in this layout, and I'll flip to the other one if need be. So what we need to do is start to handle the updating. So how is your updating going to take place, right? So in this example, the client is obviously doing timesheets because we're getting individual people with actual hours being charged against the activity, okay? Well, the challenge that you get into is, well, these people were not put into the original estimate, which of course is never going to be the case. Well, pretty much. It's pretty unusual. You're going to get an estimate right down to the person. Okay, so you're going to estimate to the role. So these folks, these Tara, Daryl, and Tracy, these all are really working against the budget that was in this role. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to come up with a standard on how you're going to marry your budget with the actuals you're receiving. So in our example here with the labor, we want our estimate at completion and our estimate to complete to be able to marry to the original estimate. So these were the estimate lines, and that's where the PM has to do the forecasting. But they need to be able to see what the estimate is looking like based on the values coming from here. Okay, so let me explain that a bit better. So let me clear these prior to the PM actually putting their estimates in there. Okay, so we get our timesheets in, and we want Calculator to go off and let us know what's going on here. So we run the forecasting calculator component, and we let it go off and do its calculation. So this is something, if you're in an integrated environment, okay, you might get an integration to run every day. You might get it to run every week. You might get it to run once a month, okay, completely depending on your particulars. The more often, the better, okay? So one of the things with this sort of tool is it helps you be able to update more often, and more often is better, okay? So you really want to try and challenge yourself to move away from the once a month, because once a month you could be using kind of stale data. So you want to drive your team to be able to update more often. So again, depending on what you're doing, if you're in a turnaround, shutdown, outage, that kind of project, you want to be updating once a day at least, and maybe twice a day at the end of each shift. That would be ideal. Now you won't necessarily get all the timesheets in every day. Okay, that might take a day or two, so that becomes a challenge. And you might not get all the updates on materials every day. Okay, so that could be a bit more of a challenge. You need some ability to manually forecast. Okay, so that's what I'm going to show you. And if you're in a capital project, okay, you definitely want to be driving towards every single week updating. And if you can get automation between your tools, you can do it even more often. That's what you're driving for. Okay, so it redid the forecasting. So let's go back and let's take a look at what that means. And then we'll start to do the project management updating on here. Okay, so let's sort this by role. It helps us see sort of what's going on here. So in this example, looks like I might have done something wrong. Okay, so let's walk through it, and Dan, you can tell me probably where I messed up. And it's probably because I pounded these numbers, but we'll fix that and I'll show it to you. Okay, so you can see here that we have the original estimate for the assembler. Here is 150 hours. Now, we've got some timesheets that came in, and it looks like we have 90 hours that have come in. So what I was expecting to see, and I think we see it on these ones, so it's probably because I did that manual clear, which I probably shouldn't have done. The computer will forecast what is left based on the estimate, but then the PM has the ability to override these. Okay, so let me go ahead and do that, and then we'll recalculate it. It's probably my order of operation was incorrect. So the PM can say, well, we've got 90 hours so far on this, and my at completion, so how much I think we're going to spend, might be over the 150. Okay, so in my example, I might say we're going to trend over. Now I can also estimate the remaining, the to complete. So you can do it either way, whatever way makes sense, and it can vary. So you want to give the team the flexibility. Now, how they input these, well, you can let them into P6. That's an option. You could give them our other updating tool called CAPS, so we can expose those and they can update them there. You could use P6 Loader and filter it out and just give them the fields they need to see so they can update it. You might do it with them in a meeting. So there's lots of different ways to get that input. So in that case, I'm saying we're going to be over. Now for these other two, although we don't have any actuals yet, we do see that some of these folks are starting to work on these. So we might get actuals on them. So we might get some hours coming in from an integration usually, or through an upload. And then we want to forecast maybe what's remaining. Okay. So we've got 20 hours burned up out of the 200, and we might know that we're going to probably be able to do this with less time. So we can do the estimate to complete, and it could be better or worse. And I'll go ahead and say this one's going to be worse. And the key here is it's going to recalculate. Okay, so let me go ahead and rerun it and have it do its calculations. Okay, we'll let it do its thing. Now, while it's doing its thing on the resources, we need the same thing available to us in the expenses. Okay, so this is a complicated one. This is the one that I was telling you that has the US, this is US and Canadian, and we want to be able to do the updating in a simple manner as well. So same sort of strategy here. We've got the at completion and to complete on the estimate for expenses available to us. Okay. Now, a little highlight here on the integration. So we want to make sure that the team can see something that comes in that was either new, unexpected, okay, wasn't part of the estimate necessarily. So we want that to be flagged. And in this example, we've got these little red stop signs letting us know that this is a new line. It wasn't part of the plan. So in this case, in the integration, we grabbed their journal entries. And of course, we need those in the system to be part of the calculations. Okay, so those are important components when you're looking at integrations. Now in this example, you can see we're carrying PO numbers, so they can go check those. So with an integration or an upload, there's other layers that you can put in here, which are really important. Okay. Okay, so let's see how it's making out on the forecast, and then we can go look at it. And okay, it's still working away, which is fine. Now, what it's looking at when it's looking at the forecast is we need to calculate what is remaining so we can understand our earned value, so we can understand whether we're going over or under, and we need to split those components up. Okay, so you can see this little example here. We've got PM estimate at completion expense cost. That's rolling up to the activity. So the total will go in there. So that's this column. So these are roll-up values that can be done automatically on the fly. So let me go ahead and put a estimate to complete on one of these line items. And we usually use the estimate line items. So these are the base estimate line items. So I can put an estimate to complete inside of here. Just to show you both values. So in this example, we put all the estimate at completion, but I can certainly use the at to complete as well. Okay, so you can mix and match. And I think that number is way higher, but I just want to show something to give the example. Okay. And I may have been too late for that one. I might need to run it again. Let's just see how I did. Yeah, let me just let it run its thing, run its course. Okay, so let's go back to the, oops, come on, there we go. Let's go back to this one and see how it did. Okay, it looks like that looks better. Okay, so it's probably the way I did it, and I probably missed the window for the updating. So this makes more sense what it's doing here. So let me just resort one more time by the role, and we'll take a look at what it's doing. So we have here that the at completion is going to be 170 hours. That's what we expect. Now, because we've already used up 90 hours, it's calculating the P6 estimate to complete. Okay, so it's putting that in there. The other thing that it will do, it can use the estimate to complete. So it can use either one of these and does the roll-ups, does the costing, and then puts the values up into the grid up top. Okay, does that automatically. So we can see our estimated labor values, and it does the different forecasting as well. Okay. Now, if the column is not in the grid, we can add it. And by adding it to the activity level, it automatically will do the roll-ups. Now, the same holds true on the expense front, and I'll just go to that procurement updating activity. And we can see the different values taking place. And we can see in this example, our at completion is quite a bit higher than our budget, our budgeted cost. Okay, so that would start to influence the at completion for the P6 value, and it'll influence the at completion total automatically as you do the updating. Okay, so those are some examples, very simple examples here on the way that the updating would take place. And we would want to just add that column to the grid. So let me go ahead and add the column to the grid. It may be here. Let me just see if I've put it here. Yeah, it is over here. So this is the P6 out of the box estimate to complete and at completion on here. And they're both the same in this example because it doesn't look like we have any incurred to date. Yeah, we don't have any actual cost on this one. Okay, so for whatever reason, we know we're going to start to go over. So it takes the values put in by the project manager and it updates appropriately the P6 field. Okay, so in this example, we also forecasted it to be 16,000. We've got an actual so far from our integration in this example, and that's the actual, and then it will calculate the difference for the estimate to complete. So the remaining, what would be called the remaining field in P6. So it's doing all that heavy lifting for us automatically, and you can go further with that, with these sort of automations, and you can have the forecasting me just see. I think I've got a better layout here. Okay, I thought I had a layout that had some flagging. I don't see it right now, so we'll skip over that. But you want to do flagging as well of whether you've got variances that are going over, and you want to be able to monitor that. I'm on the wrong tab. That's what's throwing me off. Let me just look again. Okay, so we've got those flaggings. Awesome. Let's look at the flaggings that you might want to look at on the resources. Okay, so you want to have flaggings whether your labor variance, your costing variance is off, whether your labor hour variance is off, again, whether you've got new resources, or whether you've got new people, but to an existing role. Okay, so in this case, it's a brand new role that's working on the activity. Now that's important because they not be the ideal person to do the job, but maybe because of availability, you had to swap in a different role. Okay, so these are all important things to flag so you can monitor what's going on. Okay, so lots of great capability with P6-Calculator to add these sorts of things so you can see them clearly. Now, the objective here, of course, is to get this data into the right people's hands. So we use our P6 Reporter data warehouse engine to snapshot the data, and I can snapshot it at any time. So in this case, I've got different snapshots. So in this case, it looks like it's monthly. Okay, we've taken snapshots. Now, we can take snapshots very easily in P6, and we can ask it to save the data to the data warehouse, our data warehouse. So it's another Emerald tool, and it puts the data into an easily reportable fashion. Okay, so I can just ask it, okay, I've done my updates. My updates are maybe going into May. Okay, so I've done another month of my updates. So I can move my data date, I can schedule. And of course, that's going to do a variety of calculations in P6. And once I've done that, I can ask it to go ahead and take another snapshot. Okay, so that's as simple as it is to take a snapshot. It pushes the data into the warehouse, and then that data becomes available to your reporting engine. And in our example that I just showed you, it's the reporting engine is Power BI. Okay, so the idea is you want to be able to see this data in whatever way makes sense. So it could be by cost account. In this example, it's not showing every individual activity, but you certainly could. But we're merging it by cost account. We're showing whether it's an expense or it's a resource. You can see some of my activities are missing the cost account, so we'd want to fix that. We definitely want to get in and clean up those expenses and resources missing the codes. And then you're looking at what was your cell for period 1, period 2. Now in this case, you can see that we're showing that our values have gone down. So it's possible that you've got some change orders, you've removed scope. So you want to be able to see that. And the outputs like this are hugely important, okay? So we can see whether our overheads are going off, our profits are going off. This is what you don't want to see. You don't want to see them going down, okay? So these are the types of outputs that you can then get. And in this case, we've pushed it to Power BI. Okay, let me see. I'm not seeing any questions, which is fine. Hopefully that doesn't mean nothing I'm saying makes sense, but it is quite a bit to absorb in one session. So we were definitely anticipating doing a bit more, particularly on the updating, because there's a lot of different features we've got. capable in the updated. Okay, I think I'll leave it at that because I am bumping up over our 1 hour time frame. So let me go ahead and wrap up. So we've taken a look at the software and how it works, giving you some food for thought, hopefully, on different things that you could look at with your team. There may be things you wanted to do in P6, but you just found that maybe it was going to be too hard to update, or you didn't have an integration with some other systems. And you could look at Unifier. You could we've done lots of these with contract management clients. You could look at integrating to your SAP and your accounting system. So the key here is that you're reducing the manual effort, making it much more efficient, and gathering data against activities so that you can plan for timeframes. So that client that we were talking about, where we did these multi-currencies, the important thing there was they could see when they needed their European euros, when they needed their Great Britain pounds. They knew they could see it because they had them on the activities. So they needed to go and hedge their bets with pre-purchasing currency. And that gave them the flexibility to do that. Okay, so having the data merged, the cost data, the estimated cost data merged with the dates that we get in the P6 and the ability to have that dynamically change could save you lots of money on a project. So it's important to have that kind of capability. So that's one of the key benefits. And of course, that brings that visibility that I'm talking about. And in this case, the visibility is for hedging the multi-currency. Now, the reporting that we can get out of here is huge benefit. Okay, if we can understand whether our margins are being eroded on some activities right now, it means we need to start to find a way to get those margins back. Okay, so it might be through some change orders. We might need to try and get some margin, a little bit better profits on those, but you need to see that as early as you can. Okay, so that you can make sure you don't lose money on the project. So having the reporting being able to be automated, like I was showing you there with the snapshotting process and pushing it out, huge benefits. The accuracy that you can get is very strong by having these things automatically calculating rather than using multiple systems and merging them and things like that. And in some cases, these things can certainly influence safety. So some of our other P6-Calculator components influence safety. Okay, so we can have automated flagging, automated archiving. We've got a lot of different utilities. Okay, so if there's other things that you think that you need help with that are not necessarily costing, but you want some auto flaggings, maybe auto monitoring of milestones, maybe automated archiving because you have a database that just keeps growing with work orders. We've done all sorts of things with calculators. This is just one facet of it. Okay, great. So I do want to thank you for spending the last hour with us. Hopefully you saw things that bring ideas that could benefit your team in different automations. As I mentioned earlier on, we've had programmers on our team from the very beginning. So that's why we have so many tools that we've put together and packaged up. Most of those tools were tools we built for ourselves, to be honest with you. We really didn't set out to become software developers, but because we found so many clients needing these tools, we did package them up and we've been selling them for well over 10 years. And this is just one of them. So take a look at our webinar schedule. We've got many others that could be of interest to you. So our TAPS and CAPS tools are our updating tools. They complement the team member that Oracle has. And we also have clients that use our P6 loader for updating. Okay, so those could be some that are interesting. If you're working in a group with multiple P6 users and you find once in a while that you have things deleted, moved around, and no one is telling you they did it, or they might not remember they did it, could be by accident. That could be the auditor tool that we have. That would be interesting. I mentioned the reporter tool, and the reporter tool grabs P6 data in a snapshot that won't be edited, won't be hit by users. Okay, it's automated, so much easier way to report out of P6. Okay, many more of our clients are looking at reporting out into their corporate standards, so Power BI, Tableau, etc. So take a look at some of those. We've got lots of nice add-ons, not only for P6 but for Unifier, for contract management. We still have people using that, and also archiving that more and more as they move into Unifier or AConnects or other tools. So definitely reach out. You've got my info there if you want to reach out to me. And if you're in a different time zone where reaching out to Donna in the Philippines is better for you, definitely explore that. And if you do want us to be in touch more formally, because you have certain things that you want to discuss, let us know by filling out this little question here. That just helps to make sure that we are staying in touch with you appropriately. Okay, so I think that's it. I've gone over time. I do appreciate you staying with us, and certainly reach out